overdue fine of £6,170.85. This is why you probably would be scared to return a book that was that overdue, because you wouldn't want to then be slapped with a fine. Our reporter, Harry Lowe, has been following the story, and he is here and he joins me now. Harry, how are you doing? Do we have you? Where do we have Harry? Harry, how are you?
I'm very well. Good afternoon from a sunny South London.
Oh, it's sunny indeed. You're outside Tooting Library right now. So how is it that a library book is overdue 48 years? What happened there, Harry?
Yeah, it's a very good question. It arrived at this library. I've actually got permission to step inside, so I may just do that. It arrived at this library on Monday morning. It was picked up by the manager, Heather, who's just in front of me. She opened this envelope and opened the cover of a Confederate general in Big Sur and looked inside and saw that the last time it had been borrowed was February 1974. Of course, there was no note inside. Somebody had evidently posted this anonymously, and I spotted that Wandsworth Libraries had tweeted out asking people, wonder where this came from. So I took up the story on Tuesday, and I had a little bit of a dip into a Facebook group in Canada, in this relatively tiny town of Port Moody, near Vancouver, where there are only 35,000 people. Popped a little note in there and said, hey, does anybody know where this book may have been sent from, or indeed who had posted it? Because the only clue we had on the envelope was that it had been sent from this town. That's all we had to go on. Lo and behold, the sender's wife, Linda Spence, who was perusing Facebook that afternoon, spotted it and said, that's my husband. And so I contacted her and managed to get through to her husband, Tony, who bared all and confessed to having been the man behind it.
Who bared his soul to you, clearly. I was going to say, this is exactly what I said before, that actually you would be afraid to send a book back that was that overdue, because you don't want to get slapped with a huge fine. What did Tony have to say?
Yeah, that's exactly right, Shay. That was my first question to him, actually. Did you deliberately not put a note in because you thought you may be in for a hefty fine? And he said, no, that's actually not the case. Tony said that he had intended to put a note in to the envelope, but by the time he reached the postal service in this part of Canada, he realised he'd forgotten and thought, oh, it's a bit too late now. Anyway, I asked him that and many other questions when I spoke to him on Zoom yesterday.
There's a box that we've carried around with us since we moved from England. Magazines which my wife, Linda, who worked for Haymarket Publishing, had worked on, principally Mim's magazine. And the reason we packed them in there is because when we came to Canada, she is originally from Canada, but when we came back to Canada, we thought, well, she'll have examples of the work she's been involved in, and we can just pull them out and show them to people. But as things turned out, she had a completely different career, didn't go into publishing, and they just sat in this box for 40 odd years. And we carted it around a couple of moves, and it's always been put at the back of the basement, and they're not even bothered looking at it. We had a deep purge the other month, a couple of months ago or a month ago, and we found this thing. We'd always known it was there, and we said, well, we don't want to keep all these magazines anymore. We'll take out a couple, put them aside for nostalgia reasons, and throw away the rest. Keep it simple, keep it small. So I started going through it, and stuck halfway down was this book. And I had absolutely no recollection of it getting in there, or putting it in there, or how it got in there, or who put it in there. I picked it out and opened it and it said Tooting Library. So I thought, well, I must have taken it out. And it had a return date, which was a few months prior to when we moved. So I thought, oh, it was overdue, but I don't think I'd have packed it just because it was overdue. We're leaving the country, and I'll just put it through the letterbox. So I don't know how it got there. Anyway, I stood looking at it and thinking, well, do I return this, or do I didn't want to throw it away. Obviously, it's in good condition. And so I said, no, I'm going to mail it back to them, and they can do with it as they will. And originally, I was going to put a note in there, but I completely forgot. And when I went to mail it, I realized I hadn't put the note in, but by then I couldn't be bothered. I wanted to get this thing going. So I just sent it. And I must admit, when I sent it, I thought, if they have a good sense of humor, they'll get a chuckle out of this. If not, at least they get the book back. So that's, in a nutshell, what happened. And I say I have no recollection. I have a recollection of the author, because at the time he was a bit of a cult author, Richard Brautigan, and he wrote Trout Fishing in America. So it's not a random book that I didn't even remember. I do remember reading his books. And this time I flipped through it, but I couldn't bring myself to read it again. It didn't look the sort of book I want to read anymore. So there you go.
One of the things I wanted to ask you is, do you have a message for them? It would be quite nice to play them something.
Well, I just want to apologize for taking this amount of time to return it. And I hope the people who are on the hold list waiting for it to come in are not too angry at me. It's now back in the library. And the guy who put in the request in 1977 to read this book can finally be contacted, and he can get it if he's still alive.
Do you know how much you ran up in fees, in late fees? I can give you the fee.
I just want to clarify, you said they're waiving the fees.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Yes, they are.
So I don't want to step off a plane in Heathrow and be served with a writ, okay?
No, I can tell you though, it was over £6,500 in costs. How much of a relief is it that you're not having to pay?
Oh, I've got much relief, as I say. I'd like to go back to England sometime and without being faced with that bill.
Wow, what a bill as well. Oh, what a bill that Tony would have had to pay. Harry, that is very nice of them to waive the fee. Did they say why they're willing to do that? Because can I just say, my library never waived my late fees. I mean, admittedly, it wasn't £6,000, but I did not get waived.
Sorry, Salma, to hear that. Yes, I think they said that they were going to waive it on this occasion because they wanted to encourage other people who may have significantly overdue books to potentially come forward. They said that they've actually changed their policy in recent years so that there is a cap on how much you pay. It's £8.50 is the maximum, so you can't ever pay more than that. So they want people out there to be aware of that. But in an instance where it's significantly overdue and it's travelled so far, and the representative from the library who I spoke to earlier said that it probably did cost him much more than £8.50 to post it. And looking at the postmark in the top right-hand corner, that seems to be the case. So, yes, it's not a case. I have actually had a couple of people get in touch with me today already to say, oh, I've got one that's 6 months over. What do you think of my chances? I can't say I'm an overdue fines library expert.
You are now.
But, I think the message here from Wandsworth is certainly get your books back to us, and we'll look at each case on an individual basis.
Well, yeah, absolutely. But I mean, listen, I'm automatically going to consult you about my library books now. It just seems like the right thing to do. What did the library have to say? You spoke to the librarians, didn't you, in Tooting Library?
Yeah, I did. I spoke to them about this book by Richard Brautigan, a Confederate general from Big Sur, which I must say did not sell that many copies. Only, according to the Rolling Stone, sold around 743. So it's quite unusual that this one ended up on the shelves here in South London. But the novel itself, according to the Washington Post, gave voice to the hippie generation. That said, he did die in 1984 from an apparent suicide, a self-inflicted gunshot wound, aged just 49. So the tale of this book has outlived the author quite significantly. And Wandsworth Library, when I spoke to them earlier on, were just, first of all, baffled, but then ultimately very, very content to know that this book has come back to them and it'll be back on the shelves for potential users in future.
And this is what they had to say when you did talk to them.
Well, the story came to pass because we just received a package in the mail on Monday morning. One of my colleagues picked up the post, opened it, went, oh, look at that, somebody sent us a book. And then, of course, you open it and you look at it and you look at the date label and go, well, this is a little bit unusual because it's not every day you get a book sent back that was borrowed in 1974. We don't have a record of this loan going out because it manages to predate our computer system. Normally we would have records of everything that comes in and goes out, but no, in this case it's literally too old even for that. I suppose the message I've got for the guy that sent the book back is thank you. Thanks for keeping it safe. Thank you for sending it back in a condition that it's good enough to put back on the shelves if we wanted to do that. I hope you enjoyed it, is I suppose the other thing that I'd say. We have had a few books sent back in the past. we've had a book that was returned to Putney Library that came back from Greece, and that was also quite an old one. But I think this is probably currently our record breaker, to be honest. We're always looking to get value for money for council taxpayers, but in this case, I think the book's come such a long way. I suspect the postage probably accounted for more than the maximum amount of the fine anyway, so it seemed like the only reasonable thing to do under the circumstances. I think what this story shows is that people have a lot of fondness for libraries. The guy that borrowed the book obviously took it out to Canada. I don't know what the story of it is in between it leaving here in February 1974 and suddenly returning back in June 2022. But I would hope that he found it. He went, oh yeah, I remember Tooting Library. I liked it. I'll do them a favour. I'll put it back in the post. I think my message for Tony is thank you very much. Obviously, what I'd encourage people to do is to check their shelves and to find out whether they've got anything else lurking there. And maybe rather than post them back to us, why not bring them back in and borrow something else on the journey?
There you go, classic librarian there, getting people into the libraries, which is exactly what we want. They are very forgiving. Harry, you got any overdue library books?
I have 0 at the time of speaking, but I can tell you actually, for those that are interested and who may be on the cusp in this part of South London, you pay 25p a day for the first 4 weeks, and then it rises to 35p a day thereafter. So I'm not indebted to any libraries that I'm aware of, but I'm sure there's a lot of people out there thinking, as Tony did, he had it buried in a box of magazines that he'd carted around to 3 different houses. It was only when he was doing what he called a deep purge that he found it. And I wonder how many Londoners out there will be thinking, maybe I'll have a deep purge and see what I can uncover.
Well, you just also, I think nowadays, you just wouldn't get away with that, would you? Because you'd get incessant emails saying, you need to return this library book. You haven't returned this library book. It's, so you couldn't really forget about it, could you? But maybe back in the day, and I'm trying to think, I don't think I got emails from my library when I was overdue, and that's not 48 years ago,
Well, actually, it's a very good point you make. We looked at the system, the antiquated system. You remember those bookmarks that go into the front of the library
and they stamp it.
Stamp in.
Yes, I do.
Well, not only does this have a stamp, it appears to have some kind of punch hole system below the stamps, which may have been what predated that system. And I was trying to work it out with Chris from Wandsworth Libraries, who you just heard from, what exactly that system was, because it looked like you got a dot or a punch hole every maybe 7 or 8 days, but it wasn't entirely clear what or how that system worked. But it's an indication, as you say, nowadays with the digital world, you might get an email, you may even get a text that you're overdue, but back then, maybe you get a punched hole in there and that would be that.
That's how you get away with it.
Yeah, exactly.
Harry Lowe, it's been lovely chatting to you. Such a funny story. Thank you so much for bringing it to us. Take care.
Take care.
There you go. That was Harry Lowe about a library book that's 48 years overdue.